we have the opportunity to rebuild the entire internet on top of Nostr.
The goal is to have the entire podcasting industry adopt Nostr.
Eventually, I'm confident that everything will move over to Nostr.
There's far more use cases than we could conceive of.
You invent something, my shit gets better. I invent something, your shit gets better. That is insane.
The addressable market is basically the whole world.
This is the thing that we're going to use to take down big tech and these centralized institutions. This is it.
Nostr is rising. For those who haven't listened to Bitcoin.review before, I'm NVK. I run CoinKite, where we've been making Bitcoin security products and fund devices since the very early days of Bitcoin. Nostr is a new protocol, and like any new technology, it's very hard for people to understand the why, the what, and the how. We are going to be talking to the people who actually build the things and try to explain to people what and why we're doing this. The show is not sponsored. We are supported by your Zaps and my company CoinKite. You can follow all the Nostr Rising episodes on nostrrising.com. Thank you so much for the support. Hello, and welcome back to the Bitcoin.review Nostr Rising mini-series. Today with me, I have Mr. Hodlbod.
Hello again.
Pablo.
Hello.
Alex Gleason.
Hey, guys.
And Rabble.
Hello, folks.
So today, this episode is about communities. And, in Bitcoin, I like to say Bitcoin doesn't have a community. It's for specific reasons. It's more about the nodes and that dynamic. And it happens to have many communities that use Bitcoin. But on Nostr, it seems that, it's very social, at least the first usage of it. So having a community that sort of like build out the system and then maybe, migrates into many communities, especially ones that may not like Bitcoin, very likely to happen. I'm sure people are dying to have some non-Bitcoiners on Nostr too. So I figure, hey, since we're talking about communities, and Rabble, you helped build a small one on Bird app.
Yeah.
I think people may have heard of Twitter, and I think you were an integral part of that. Why don't we start talking a little bit about how did it happen? Just sort of in a tight little conceptual way, how did that sprout?
I mean, in the case of Twitter, its initial community were folks in south of Market in Soma and San Francisco who worked in web tech and multimedia. At the time, it was called Multimedia Alley, I think, and who had their own blogs. And so it was a whole bunch of people who already kind of knew each other, kind of showed up at each other's events, were reading and replying to each other, but on blogs. And that was the initial crew who made the core of Twitter and defined the original culture.
So it was kind of like a migration of the blog role. Would you say that?
Yeah, we didn't invent a new community. We were part of a community, and we rolled out tech, and we invited our friends.
That sounds it sounds very similar to what's happening now. It has that vibe, doesn't it? I was a very early Twitter user, and I was part of the media crowd there. It has that vibe. So Alex, you've also been around the block.
Yep.
You've built the pseudo truth network.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
Essentially, what was it? It was like a lesbian Mastodon instance that got migrated to be a Trump instance. Amazing.
Yeah.
I love the story of this. It's just brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I built this feminist website called Spinster, and that was when I really knew that this model works.
Okay. What's feminist?
Yeah. And then I went on to be the head of engineering at Truth Social, which reused much of the code from that Spinster website. And so I presented at Riga this year, Ditto, which is the new software I'm working on. And the thing I'm most excited about that's happening right now is actually all the stuff going on with Brazil, with X being banned there. And so we recently launched cobrafuma.com, which is a Ditto for Brazil type of website. And obviously Brazil is a huge country. There's many communities within Brazil. There's opportunities, I think, to grow there. But what we're really working on is just getting ready for a big wave of people coming from Brazil.
So Brazil is interesting, right? Because, Orkut really only happened because of Brazil. and then India came after. But like it was essentially it, right? And then the Brazilians sort of like eventually migrated over to Facebook, but they came late. And how's the uptake in Brazil for the Ditto Brazil instance and Mastodon and sort of like that side of the graph?
Mastodon, they've announced that they've grown. In Cobra Fuma, we definitely have like a decent audience of Brazilian people, but I think they're people who mostly already were on Nostr. It's just an opportunity to kind of be talking with other people in Brazil. But what we're really interested in doing next is kind of talking with some Brazilian influencer people. But before that, we're kind of just making sure that we're really ready to be able to handle the huge like influx of traffic that I'm expecting.
It's a 250 million people country. Cobra Fuma.
Exactly. Are you Brazilian, NBK?
Yes, I was born in Brazil. Born and raised.
I accused Pablo accidentally of being Brazilian, but...
Yeah, that's okay. Argentinians are just like last kind of Brazilians. With like a okay barbecue.
Especially porteños. Basically.
They essentially speak Portuguese with Spanish words. They don't speak Spanish.
I mean, Portuguese is a dialect of Spanish anyway, right? So...
Well, I'd love to talk with you a little bit more one-on-one, NBK, when you have a chance.
Oh, yeah. We should just cut Pablo off and continue.
Portuguese is just what you get when you speak Spanish and drink too much.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole podcast about like trade languages. It was designed so nobody can understand. So guys, like, it's easy to think about communities when we're talking about just social solutions, right? Like, tweeting or WhatsApping or, that kind of functionality, right? But community is a lot more than that, right? Like communities is commerce, right? Is the discoverability of commerce, is like how you interact business-wise, say like Fiverr. Communities has a much bigger like thing, and communities tend to get captured, right? Just what say Fiverr is, right? Fiverr is this monopoly on, monetizing poor people that, can make double now on this platform. And like, it's amazing. Like, it's like everybody wins, but they're completely captured there, right? And I bring everything back to Bitcoin just because that's where my head is. It's been for the last 15 years. But so, forgive me if that's where we always go. And Bitcoin sort of like created this way of like removing the capture point from the money so that we can go and do things, right? How does Nostr essentially like decaptures social graphs? Because this is really what communities are.
So I think that the thing to remember about other past communities that have grown online is not like everybody in the community is the same. It's not like all of a sudden a community goes and joins a new thing. There are people in a community who are followers, and there are people who are just reading and they're participating, or they're peripherally in a community. And then there are people who are central to a community and they have a lot of social influence. And so when we see people move from one platform to another or adopt a new way of communication, it's usually because some core of early adopters start trying it out, and then they convince the early influencer folks, people who have cachet and leadership in the community, not influencers because of their algorithms, but influencers because people actually respect and listen to them. And then those folks go and try it with the early adopters. And if they like it, then they start promoting it. And they say, this is this new place. I found this new place. Let's all go over here. And when that happens, we need to make sure that it's easy for the, say, knitting community to bring people into the knitting part of Nostr. And that's part of the problem that we don't quite have. And it's one of the exciting things about Ditto is it gives you an anchor point of go to this webpage and you can see a timeline of all the people into knitting. And I can join there and then eventually filter out to the rest of the Nostr network.
So, Alex, I ran a Mastodon instance, an infamous one.
I remember.
That got kicked out. Like, we were blocked by every single other instance on ActivityPub.
Yep.
And then I also discovered my dictator powers on that instance, which was great. It was a lot of fun kicking out haters. Wow, I totally get dictators, man. It's a lot of fun. This is very, very satisfying. But, as you would think, right? Like in a dictatorship, value tends towards zero, right? Because, you start having a little bit of fun and then all of a sudden it's a dictatorship, right? Like, and you control the message. We didn't get there on that instance. It was just a little bit of fun. But the point is, my discovery with that was like, okay, this is just a database. I own everybody's data. I own everybody's identity. And they can't even like transfer that to another Mastodon instance. So like I was, okay, Mastodon is a shitcoin. And I know you were sort of trying to hack things in a way that like you can sort of, because there's a lot of people there and we can't just abandon them.
Right.
And, a lot of the folks are not necessarily going to like just ape into a new NSEC into Nostr, right? Like, so like, how do we bridge that in a way that is healthy? So it's like, it's not like they become just like mirror posting into Nostr. It's like they have a path to freedom.
Right. So I built that bridge, the Nostr bridge between ActivityPub and Nostr. But of course, on the ActivityPub side, it still has all the same problems that ActivityPub has that you described. So I think like eventually people on ActivityPub are going to see the problem and they're going to want to do something different. And hopefully we're going to try to convince them to do so. I loved Bitcoin hackers when it was around. When it left, it was like, oh, I feel like it left a major hole that it's gone now. Actually, I was very sad when it was gone.
It's still there. I encourage everybody to go to bitcoinhackers.org.
When are you going to migrate from Mastodon to a Ditto instance?
Oh, no. I recommend people check the URL.
Yeah.
You guys don't have to read it during this pod, but it sets the tone.
Contact Neil at Neil.
Yeah, so the Mastodon isn't there anymore, but there is a web page there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there is a message in a bottle. So you were saying like my biggest fear with all this sort of bridges and it became lazy, right? Like I think one of the things that like made the Mastodon instance sort of like wane off a little bit was the fact that like even I was not interested in being in it. I just sort of like backup posted into it. Like, how does Ditto bridge this in a way that there is a path?
Right. So I would say that the thing we're focused on most is actually on new users. We want to take the Mastodon model that I feel was pretty successful in actually attracting people. Now, in terms of retaining people, that's where many of the problems lie, because people didn't want to stick around for various reasons. Or like I was going to say about Bitcoin hackers, when you delete an instance, then basically all of those people are just like gone from the network forever. And that's been a major problem that we've been experiencing is like these admins kind of attract all these people and then they get fatigued. And then they just delete the server and then all those people are no longer on the network anymore. That's a major, major issue that I feel like people aren't really thinking in the long term about ActivityPub of the impact that this has. And on Nostr, the problem is completely solved. So I think what we need to be doing really, obviously, the ActivityPub, it's still important. It's still, as far as I know, the largest decentralized social network that exists today.
Decentralized between quotes.
Right, exactly. But besides maybe Blue Sky, which has even bigger quotes. Yeah. And so I think there's obviously still value in retaining connection between them, but I'm really interested in starting new communities on Nostr, and then maybe for some of those communities on ActivityPub to move over too. But I think that eventually the Nostr side is just going to grow so much that it can't be ignored anymore.
There's like 50 tangents I want to take right now, but I think one that's important to mention is it's going to be the example throughout this whole mini series is Fountain with the podcast 2.0. It's like you have a walled garden, right? That's Mastodon. Sure, it can talk to other instances, but it's all bullshit, right? Because it's not really doing what it claims to be doing. And like, imagine if like you switch a button and then all of a sudden you can start creating NSECs for those users, right? And you give them the option to do something with it, or you keep it for them. I mean, there is some trade-offs. And then all of a sudden, like, I mean, that content starts to appear in Nostr. Like it's magic. And I don't know, like, it's not like that simple to implement that, but like, that's sort of like, I've seen the example once with the Fountain thing, and it's like, now I'm in love with that example.
Yeah, I mean, that gets us to like, where are the users? Where's their NSEC? How do we manage it? How do we make it easy for people who understand this stuff. And like Alex and I have had a bunch of conversations where I'm like, why can't Ditto just support a username and password login and then like put their damn NSEC on the server and let users copy it and back it up, but be a custodial Nostr server? And Alex is like, rightly like, I don't want that control. I don't want that honeypot.
No, totally. I get it. But like, what's interesting is that like, you have to think about this stuff sort of like in a rainbow of trade-offs, right? And right now they have nothing, right? Like if you're on Mastodon, you literally have nothing as a user. Like you don't own your account, you don't own your content, you have nothing, right? So if you have an NSEC on Mastodon that just somehow bridges it, like now at least your content is out there. Even if you don't have control over it anymore or can't even use that same key anymore, but at least the content is out there, right? So like that's something. So like, I totally get it. Like I'm not like, I closed my last company because we didn't want to custody Bitcoin, right? So it's like, I understand. But like, anyways, like, Maybe Pablo can help with like the NSEC bunker, right? Like, and we figure out cool ways of doing that. But it's a bit beyond the scope of this episode. But like, I'm sure implementation wise, we can get somewhere. Now, maybe Hodlbod, who's sort of like building groups, right? Like has a bit of a groups between quotes, has some sort of like a input on this.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts and probably too many thoughts. I'm on group implementation, maybe number 5 at this point. So I haven't built anything really usable yet because it's all been prototypes for the last year and a half. Meanwhile, Alex has been plodding away on Ditto and has something that's serviceable, which is great. And that's because groups are insanely complicated in all kinds of different dimensions. But, talking about like moving from Mastodon to Nostr as it is, as like a Twitter replacement, is very highly sovereign. You hold your own keys, you never share them with a custodial provider, you get into it on those terms, you can run your own relay, you can write your own client, you can do whatever you want. Groups or communities there are different kinds of communities that fall along a spectrum of how many walls you actually want, how much infrastructure and support and guide rails you actually want. So, we've been talking about communities. We started talking about communities in the sense of social clusters, right? And those are communities with no guardrails. They are totally individual oriented. They're based on, like a follow graph or actual analog relationships that exist between people. And they are discovered, not invented. As individual relationships build up, you can, if you quantify those relationships, you can discover that social graph.
I like that quote, discovered, not invented.
And, this is what happens with like the Lightning Network. You can see the clusters emerge, the hub and spoke kind of structure of Lightning. It's not perfectly distributed. It's merely decentralized. But, what Alex is doing with Ditto is adding a layer of guardrails on top of that, where you have an instance that is topical, but it's an open instance. Anyone can join. It's still Nostr, so it's still sovereign. And then you can move along the spectrum towards more and more closed, private, cured, and related to like a given nexus. So it may not be even topical. It might actually be like social. And my goal has always been to like build something that'll help my church community get off of Facebook, which I thought would be simpler than it is. But turns out that's really hard because
they had a lot of value, man. People love to shit on these platforms, but man, they had a lot of value.
Yeah, and there's not just that. It's like, it's the hardest kind of group to deal with, right? Because it's a large group, but it wants to be private. And no large group can be essentially private because anyone can infiltrate and take screenshots. So at that point, like, what do you do? Do you like fire hose everyone onto the main Nostr network, or do you do something with like limited privacy? These are all questions that I'm thinking about. But like, kind of the takeaway is like, there are all these dimensions. One is that closed versus open dimension, but there's also size. There's, read and write access. Maybe you want a group that only certain people can write to, but anyone can read from. That's like a Telegram broadcast thing. There's moderation. You might have really strict moderation or laissez-faire moderation or decentralized moderation. You might have a high level of trust in the relay operators. So you might just use a single instance, or you might have no trust in them and want to straddle a whole bunch of different relays for censorship resistance purposes. So anyway, there's a lot of things to think about with communities. I find it really interesting, and I've been thinking about this for a year, and I still haven't found any answers.
I mean, listen, on Twitter, people figure out they're using hashtags, right? Like they invented that so they could create communities around topics, right? Like people will find a way.
and the hashtags on Twitter were not a creation by the company.
Yeah.
Like that's an important thing to remember. It was just, Chris Messina was organizing these Barcamp unconferences, and he wanted to have all of the tweets about the unconference together. And he wanted an easy way to discover new unconferences. And so he said, well, why don't we just use this hashtag thing? Because it kind of looks like an IRC channel. And it worked. And then after people started using it, they're like, oh, well, let's make them links and let you find all the other posts by it.
Yeah, I think the problem that Hodlbod has been referring to, and the problem that you've been thinking around, is a problem that is unsolvable. Like you cannot have fully private digital community. If a community has more than one person,
yeah,
and if it's digital, it's not private. It's not perfectly private. So I think it's much more what is the barrier for segregation, because you can always take a screenshot. It can be on Signal, it can be MLS, it can be whatever you want. If it's digital, you take a picture, you take a screenshot, you can have a conversation with a person in the middle of the forest with no devices, and then the other person can go in and say, oh, you know what Hodlbod told me?
He likes MLS.
So I think it's when you do away with that whole part of the problem that cannot be solved, you can embrace a much simpler approach without having to think around all that design area.
Yeah. Like I don't know how if you guys ever been in groups like that, but sometimes you have like groups that are sort of like doing things that are a little bit more cypherpunky, like and you don't want the solution is always less people, right? Like so you have like for example, if you wanna sext, normally most cases it would be two people. Like when you want to talk about some crazy new encryption thing, maybe 3-4 people, and that's how it's need to know basis, right? Like that's that. Oh, actually, that would be a cool name for a client. Need to know basis. And I mean, I have to bring up like Rabble had this very interesting bot, right? The bot that like tagged people.
The bot that pissed a bunch of people off.
Oh, it was one of my most favorite things that happened on Nostr in the last little while. Okay, so it's like, you created a bot. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you created a bot that went and tagged people based on the kind of speech they have. Some, the people who are more righty may not like the bot. Let's put it this way. Like what a brilliant way of creating like some filter for the people that don't want to see that kind of topic, right? Like, I mean, listen, reality is everybody wants their safe space, right? I want a crypto anarchist safe space. I don't want to see any commie stuff on it, right? Like, I want to like click a button and I just want to feel good. It's just Mises flowing through, right? Like, it's just safe. Like some days that's what I want to see. And some days I want like more of a fire hose thing. It's like I want to argue with like somebody I don't agree with, right? But I joke about this, but it's true, right? Like people don't want to see everything, right? Like and sometimes a community just means a filter. Mm-hmm. Like you want to just see and interact with the people you want to interact, but you may be using the same pipe, right? It'll be the equivalent of being in the public square, right? Say New York Times Square. And, instead of screaming from one side to the other between the crazies that are in the middle, literally defecating, you sort of like go around and you go into a little huddle, right? Like, and you get close to each other and you talk, right? Like, and you decide where you're going for dinner. And you may not want to scream that across the whole thing, but it doesn't mean you're outside of the public square, right? Like, Nostr has this magical sort of like pipe. It's like a magical pipe where everybody can be in it, right? But like we don't have to see everything. Humans are not designed to see everything, right? And anyway, so like that bot really sort of like brought home this idea where like you have the freedom to have a bot that finds content you don't want to see. It takes it out of your feed, right? And you can turn that on and off, but you're not censoring it, right? Like on Twitter or other things where it's like, you press a button and the content disappears for everybody, right? Like that is wrong. That's what we don't want.
Or you can mute the bot, or you can use a relay that doesn't accept those event kinds, or you can use a relay that doesn't accept any of the events from that bot. Like, point with the bot was not that the bot was right. And we've done lots of tweaking to it, and it's really wrong, like in Asian languages, unfortunately.
Wait, what bot is this? I think you need to clear your name that you're not Reply Guy.
No, this is the tagger bot. It used to be called Reportinator, and that even pissed off more people because it was a cute name and they didn't like being reported. But it basically, it looks at everyone who's using the Nostr social app and then goes 1 degree out with Web of Trust of the content we think they will see, and then downloads all of those messages and then runs it through OpenAI's content moderation classifier. And then if it's like a really high, like it has to be almost over the top, like we have it tuned, it's really high, it issues a 1984 event that's tagged with the original content. Now, the problem is Amethyst and a couple other apps show 1984 events as comment replies.
What?
So,
oh my God,
people think the bot is like replying to all of their like spicy language posts.
I mean, the answer is don't use Android, but that's for many reasons.
Like, that's not even the intention. The intention is like give people a tool to choose how to filter.
Yeah, the privacy side is something that people think of first when they think of groups, but like the moderation side is exactly, the complement is like you want certain people to not see what you're saying, but you also want to not see what certain people are saying. And like I think that's a really like interesting way that Nostr can help us build communities, because what you're talking about is basically an algorithm, right? Like moderation is an algorithm to filter content.
Yep.
And, we came from all these centralized platforms that had these closed algorithms that were forced upon us or heavily recommended or whatever. And on Nostr, everyone was very happy with reverse chronological feeds for a long time, but algorithms have started to pick up steam in popularity. People don't just want whatever's happening right now all the time. And communities and moderation are really just another way of having an algorithm. And having an open algorithm system can make it possible to do way better moderation, not only like community-centric moderation, but individual-centric moderation. So you can join a community that has loose moderation standards, and then you can moderate more stringently than that community prefers to moderate, or less stringently. You could say, like, I'm going to opt out of the moderation that the community is doing to see what kind of chaos is lurking under the surface. And so, like, having community solutions that are open-ended enough to allow the individual user to choose their moderation level, I think is like a key thing that Nostr can provide that we should be careful not to over-specify and lose.
But, it's working, right? So I downloaded Nostr Social, right? And I started scrolling, and like every single post was like marked with the click here to view thing. I know, but it was beautiful because like this is what a free market is supposed to be, right? Like you download the thing, okay, and you go into it, and it's funny for me, but like say you don't like it, right? Like you have the freedom to like delete it and download something else and try it, but you still have access to everything. Like nobody is removing your agency, right? And nobody is taking away your keys. Nobody's taking away your content. It's just like we have different preferences. It's the same with Bitcoin. It's like, like you can't prevent anybody from doing what they want to their Bitcoin. It's kind of the whole point. Like people you don't like are going to do things you don't like with your Bitcoin. Like, they're going to buy ETF Bitcoin. It's like they're free to do it. I mean, they're not really free to buy ETFs, but that's a different point. But the thing is, they're going to do things like some people are going to gamble. Some people are going to like inscribe cats, and we see these examples playing out, but it was just never possible before to be a key pair on a network.
Or to inscribe a cat on a Swift transaction.
Exactly. I was never able to send a cat with my wire transfers. Just not possible, right? And the Nostr thing is like, what do communities want, right? Like, at least in my view, it's like, they want the freedom to do their shit in peace, right? Or to go antagonize another community, like, and turn it off when they don't want the response anymore. Like, it's a classic human behavior, right? Like, but the thing is, like, we remove the capacity of the humans cutting off the network here, right? Like, which is really cool.
I think communities are more than just an algorithm. I think that's actually one of the things that we've lost with the sort of TikTok and Instagram influencer dominated social media world. I'm reading this book, Tribes, by Seth Godin, and it's sort of from 2007. It's so old that it talks about Twitter, but it talks about twits instead of tweets.
That's amazing.
So book talk isn't a community?
So book talk is a community. Absolutely, it is a community, and people have created an identity in where they're doing it. But what needs to happen is you need to have that name. You need to have that conception of, I am a member of this community. And on purely algorithmic systems, it's like,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's loosely defined.
Not put like, it's hard to pull everyone together.
You're removing agency, right? Like,
yeah.
I choose to be friends with you or choose to hate you, right? Like, on my own wheel, right? Like, it's like, that's the humanity choice right there. Right? It's like I like you or I don't like you, right? Those are equally powerful sort of like things. And what the algo does is like, and I'm going to repeat probably this on every single episode we record. It's like on Twitter right now, it's like, it finds things that didn't even exist, vomits on me from people I didn't even know existed. It's just horrific. It's like, like, I feel my skin crawl, right? Like, this is not a community. Like, it's very unpleasant.
So I have this theory that part of what we're seeing with cancel culture is people seeing culture mediated through social media where they have no real power.
Yes.
There's no way to say,
stop.
This community has this rules and you're not following them, so we're going to not put you in this community. Instead, what you have to do is you have to try and get everyone to unfollow everyone else, the person who sort of didn't behave under the community rules. You have to like discredit them. You have to do this giant social effort to cancel them because you don't have tools to be like, okay, I'm going to kick you out of this Coracle group.
I mean, humans love just kicking somebody off the island, right? Like, even if the island doesn't exist, right? Like, it's just like people just want a little agency. Like when we block somebody like on old Twitter, like, it helps with that, right? Like, it gives you some agency. And on Nostr, really, all you can do is just mute. But still, like, you no longer see it and you get a little closure out of that, right? Like, but the reality is, like, blocking doesn't exist in real life, right? Like, all you can do is close the window of your car. The guy's still screaming outside. And he might follow you home. And Nostr kind of like emulates more of like a normal, like, physical world reality. Just sort of like the closed platforms, right? Like, it's cool how that plays out to the community dynamics.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Rabble, is right. I think that there is a truth between what you're saying and what I was saying about, communities being emergent, which is kind of what you were saying before. And I think it also depends on the kind of community and the kind of person who's involved. This is why I think communities are so interesting. It's like, it's an individual choice which community you want to get into or remain a part of, but communities also have an identity, and not all communities are totally permeable. And so even if you want access to a community, you may not be able to get access either because of centralized control or because of a social dynamic. And, there are certain communities that have rules, like, if you're kicked out, that's like a final thing, and people actually respect the community leader who makes that call. Other communities are much looser. There are also different terms that an individual can join a community on. They can say, like, this is my identity and I will be here all the time, and I will completely toe the line with everything this community kind of comes up with. Or they can say, I'm here as a visitor. I kind of just want to see what's going on. I'm not going to really like submit myself to your rituals and moderation and everything. So it's like, yeah, I mean, communities are, I like to say they're a Rorschach test. Everyone has a different idea of what they're talking about when they talk about communities. And even some people, mostly myself, have a different idea every time they talk about communities.
Well, there's different implementations too, right?
Yeah, which is a good segue to maybe we can discuss the different approaches, because we have like 6 different approaches.
Yes, you know, and it should be. Sorry, can you guys hear some screaming? I promise my wife is not killing my kid. It's like she's trying to put a 4-year-old in the bath.
Close the window so they.
No, there is no closing the window. You know, like my kids are not exactly compliant.
I wonder why.
Knowing you, that does not surprise me at all.
You know, he's still pooping in the woods. He refuses to use toilets. Anyways, it's very difficult for me to hear the screaming and concentrate. So like, it's kind of funny, but tech people sometimes like forget that like implementation follows user behavior, right? Like, and most of the time, the tools are simply a representation of the wheel, right? Like the tool is in that shape because, you know, that's how you use it and that's what you're trying to achieve, right? So like, you know, you're going to have this like, you know, super crazy cryptographically protected communities of MLS because that's what the people want. You know, you might have a huddle in a public square while the people are screaming on the side, right? Maybe that's the bot that helps you sort of, you know, ignore the screams, you know, and I'm sure you guys probably have some more ideas, but that's the idea is that like, but we have a common network, right? And that was not possible before. And, you know, and you can even bring the multi-content, you know, maybe like, I don't know if it's a bit out of scope, but.
No, it's super in scope. That is the most exciting part to me.
When you're having a conversation with somebody in a community, right? And they may bring in cat pictures or long form essays that nobody wants to read or whatever it is.
Or a coin join or any kind.
But it's fully integrated into the network. It's not like a parachuted in like it is now. Mm-hmm. I think this is important because you know, it shapes the communities.
Yeah, to me, that's what excites me the most about communities in Nostr. And I'm a NIP29 shield, so I'm about NIP29.
Never heard of it.
It's the most important NIP.
Please walk through and tell us the different implementations.
Yeah, actually, that'd be a great summary.
Okay, should I give a quick history?
Yeah, please.
All right. So I'll try to be thorough. Let me know if I miss anything. But I think, to my knowledge, the first group implementation was the chat room thing, and that was very basic. It had no moderation, and that was kind of why it died. No one uses it.
It's a throw box.
Yeah.
It's essentially a throw box. That was my favorite thing about Nostr.
Yeah, there was no way to control spam. This was before the Web of Trust days, so you couldn't even ban people based on mute lists or Web of Trust or anything. So that kind of went away. NIP72 communities was the next step, and that sort of created a group that had metadata and a list of moderators, and it had 2 main problems. Whoever created the group was the owner of the group, so you couldn't transfer group ownership, and one person was the iron-fisted dictator of the group, which can work sometimes, but it's not really usually the way you want to do things. The other thing is the moderation was required. So The NIP said the moderators have to whitelist events that people publish to them before they show up.
Every single time, yeah.
Which is pretty crazy.
Which is just a huge chore for moderators. And this is why I say that moderation should be, you might have that model, that might be valid, or you might have a blacklist model, or you might have like a distributed moderation model based on members or non-members or whatever. Anyway, so those died because no one wants to babysit a community after the first week after they've created it. There's a few of them that are still out there. Coracle implements NIP72 communities without the moderation part of it. But I was more interested in private groups. And so I wrote NIP87, which is still a draft. No one cares about it. And there were some precursors to this, like Arcade City had something similar. There were a bunch of different attempts at cryptographic groups. And that still has the problem of there being a single admin. But I was generating the groups with a different admin key, so you could at least invite other people to administer the group. So it was a little bit more permeable that way. Moderation was not part of it because the events posted to the group were encrypted. So you would use a shared key and invite a members list. And every time you want to change the members list, you rotate the key. So you can actually kick people out of the group from a given point. You don't have forward secrecy or post-compromise security, but it was a decent step forward. Then we've got Ditto, which is the synthesis of Mastodon and Nostr. And I don't know, like, Alex, would you say that Ditto is a pretty open format of community, kind of like Reddit?
Yeah. I would love to just explain the difference between Ditto and groups, because the biggest question that people still ask is they join a Ditto server and they're like, where are the groups? Ditto doesn't have groups. I just want to make that very clear. It's a completely different way of thinking about communities. It's completely different from what Hodlbod and what Pablo are doing by building these kind of like Facebook group implementations. On Ditto, it's a tactic for growing the network by launching a bunch of different websites on different domains that are targeted towards a specific community and curated towards that specific community, so that we can actually create, like, on Cobra Fuma, we can be displaying all of the posts in Portuguese, and we can have trending posts in Portuguese. And so I just want to make sure people understand that there's a difference. Basically, it's taking Mastodon's model that they designed of the internet, of these different websites on different domain names, and just kind of applying that model to Nostr. So it's like there being a bunch of different little Twitters, like different open networks that people can join.
Are they their own relays?
Yes, they do. They are their own relays.
And what you publish there is just a kind one, but it's within the community because you only publish to that relay. Is that how it works?
No, it publishes everywhere. It's actually the differentiating factor between people on a Ditto server and another Ditto server is actually their NIP05 name. Because when you sign up on a Ditto server, you become granted a NIP05 name, and then there's a dedicated feed for all the people on that server.
Which I really like. I think that is such a good idea.
It is,
because you have a single identity. You have a home server, but you're not stuck at the home server. I think that is a great fix for Mastodon.
Yeah. Any Nostr user can log into ditto.pub. They can log into cobrafuma.com. They can log into gleasonator.dev, and they can use any of those sites. But in order to actually be considered a member of cobrafuma.com, you need to have the cobrafuma.com NIP05 identifier. And that kind of grants you special privileges and rights on that server, including the right to be seen more on that server than on other servers.
Oh, that's amazing.
So with my pub key, I would not be able to write to the Cobra Fuma one, right?
No, you can. You can go and you can make public posts, and they will be distributed to like other relays on the Nostr network. But the UI highlights people that are on that have the matching NIP05 of its own server.
You won't show up on the local timeline.
Exactly. There's a dedicated feed that is emphasized in like the UX that people go, and that's like one of their main ways they actually interact with the website is by going to this local feed that shows all of the other people sharing this NIP05 name.
I like that. It would be the equivalent of having like, these people are not retarded. These people are retarded. Like it's great.
I mean, you think of like Truth Social. I feel like Truth Social is a perfect example of like, this group of people that launched a new social media platform targeted towards a specific group of people. And so that's really kind of the idea of what we're trying to do is to make it so people can launch these independent social media platforms, but they're all integrated with the entire Nostr sphere.
But see, like the main thing that people loved on Mastodon was cutting people off. Like they love that. It's like they roll in it. Like it's their favorite thing.
The admins love it.
Yeah, exactly. Like so like I feel like there is no alignment of incentive. I wish there was, but it doesn't seem to be an alignment of incentives. Like they want to be fully segregated. It's almost like they don't want us seeing their content to dunk on them.
Yeah, I mean, many of the admins on Mastodon, I don't think there's a chance that they'll switch to Ditto, but that's okay because those are not really the people that I'm targeting.
Right.
And I would love for those people to change their mind. I think what we're building is better here. But yeah, if what you want is to be a little dictator, then on Ditto, that's not where you're going to get to do it. I mean,
I love this.
Yeah, you can delete content from your Ditto server, just to be clear, but people can freely move. Like if I'm looking at ditto.pub and then an admin of ditto.pub deletes a note on ditto.pub, I can just look at cobrafuma.com instead. And then I'm the posts are being filtered by that website's admin instead of the ditto.pub admin.
I wish there was a way for us to migrate bitcoinhackers.org. I think I deleted the database though.
The biggest issue is just the keys, because each user needs to be signing their notes with their keys.
Yeah, we need the fountain solution with scalable, secure,
yes,
like custodial NSEC bunker that we can just use OAuth into.
I mean, like, honestly, like once we just standardize on a way of signing towards a new key. Say, for example, if I create a key, right, and I say like, oh, that key used to be mine, and like the client that had that key sort of say, hey, that is true, right? Makes another event like that. That is not cryptographically kosher for Bitcoiners, but it's essentially like assuming honest clients, right? Like, it's a very reasonable path. Like, like it's not great, but like it works until we sort out some other key solution, right? There is hopefully a bounty for Frost signing coming out soon. And there's other things too. Like, I'm generally having a hard time nerd sniping some Galaxy Brain cryptographers to come to Nostr, because Nostr is such like a brain break for people who are coming from Bitcoin. Like, it's brutal. Like, it's like, here's this thing. It's freedom, but it's the opposite of Bitcoin. So like, it's a very hard pill to take. No lube. So anyway, so like, but we're going to get there. Like, the daily active users on most of the bigger Nostr projects are like 2-3x what they were just a month or two ago. So like, things are going, the traffic is coming. We're starting to see those remember like in the early days of Twitter, you start seeing the bigger blogs and the bigger publications starting to have accounts that all that they do is just post whatever new article they have and stuff. That's a very nice heuristic, because they are now identifying that this is a place where their content needs to be, right? So we're seeing that stuff.
All right, so should I continue with my history lesson here?
Yeah, let's go over the...
Believe it or not, we have four more to go. So NIP17 is worth an honorable mention. It's more of a new DM spec, but it supports multiple members like group chats. So that's an option for encrypted group chats. Again, no forward future secrecy or for post-compromise security.
Gift wraps, right?
Yeah, gift wraps, exactly.
Which is a whole problem on its own, right?
Yeah. You can't really protect against spam as easily in that setup. Then we've got NIP29, which is simple communities or simple groups. I like to call them not very simple groups.
Just because you want to overcomplicate them.
But the basic idea with those is like they're Telegram groups. So you have a group and it's supported by a relay. So you actually trust the relay to do some administration of the group on your behalf. But, you can also run that group across multiple relays. Pablo, go ahead and explain that, because you're the NIP29 guy here.
Yeah, to me, NIP29 is like the design space within NIP29 is super interesting, and it like blows your mind. So it can get a little bit weird, but the idea is that you delegate trust into the relay, but you can run. I think you can run the same group across multiple relays. So a NIP29 group can be forked. So, for example, MBK could be running the Bitcoin hackers NIP29 group, and maybe he decides to start censoring people, and then someone can come in and they can fork the group, and they can start running the exact same group on their own relay. Now, members of the original group can say, oh no, I only like MBK's version of the group. Some other people can say, no, I like both, and I want to wreck from both relays, and I will see the union of the original and the fork. So messages that are members that on NDK's version are not present, they could be present on a per user basis. So each user can decide, okay, I will use relay from NDK and the relay from Hodlbod and the relay from Rabble. And to me, that is what that group represents. It's like a really weird conception of a group and very edge case, but I find it fascinating.
Oh, that was going to happen a lot. I mean, like, you look at everything, right? Like the politics subreddits, they end up having like people breaking off. Like This is a normal behavior.
My favorite political schism in subreddits is between the meth users subreddits and the anti-woke meth users. Because there's the main meth user subreddit, it's like a couple 100,000 people. They decided that they were going to be not homophobic and not racist and like all politically progressive. But then there were a bunch of people who were just like, I want to be able to say whatever shit I want and talk about meth. So there's the anti-woke meth users thing. And the truth of the matter is that most of the posts for these meth users aren't related to whether or not someone is talking about politics, because it's a bit irrelevant to your meth use. And so there should be able to have two relay servers.
That's amazing.
One which is like, we ban all of the woke shit, and the other one is like, we ban all of the anti-woke shit, and everybody else can choose the breadth of it, and then it could get shared. And so that
is so cool.
Fundamental problem.
That is the best thing I've heard all week.
Yes, like world peace.
Imagine if each individual one of those users could choose whether to listen to the woke version, to the anti-woke version, to both, or prefer the woke version, but if there is a reply from one of the people in the woke version that is replying to an anti-woke version, you can see the conversation. Like, you can mix and match. And it's so weird. It's so fascinating what can be done with that kind of stuff.
But in the Nostr way, it's actually the same group. It's just different visions of the same group, right?
Yeah.
It's the same group. It's just different vision. So you as a user, you have the power of choosing to what you want. Like, what is this group? Like, what is the edge of this group? You know? And I find that absolutely fascinating.
I mean, like, it's kind of like a programmatic way of resolving blocking, you know, in a way. Like, it really is. Like, or muting, right? Like, it's just more efficient. But that's what you do, right, with those things. Remember, like, with the Reddit, the extension that you can tag people and sort of like, so, you know, if you ever participated in a Bitcoin, like when Bitcoin migrated from Bitcoin Talk forum to Reddit, you know, like the amount of socks was like out of control. So you start tagging people. It's like, I'm losing my mind here. I'm pretty sure I've already argued this person, but they have a new name now, right? Like, and it's the same idea. Like you can cater the experience and the filtering to like your preferences, right? Like that's a good place to go.
And one of the other things that I really like about NIP29 is that every kind, so it's like a mini Nostr, right? So any kind can be published within a group. So you can publish a chat, or you can publish a long forum, or you can publish a CoinJoin transaction, or you can publish whatever it is that you want to publish. You can publish targeting specifically the group. I think that's super powerful too.
It seems to me that 29 and Ditto kind of occupy a really similar space in terms of kind of creating these sort of echo chambers that cover the same content using different filters. The limitation of NIP29 that I ran into last month when I tried to build a client for it is that it doesn't work well for content that is highly context dependent that isn't explicitly linked, right? So in NIP29, you can have a reply and you can pull in the parent post from wherever on the network it is, and at least show that it's missing, even if you don't want to pull it in. But if you have like a chat room that forks and exists on three different locations, it's hard to make sure that you have all the context. You can get some error replies, and that problem is kind of difficult. And so that's why I'm moving over to the relay-based groups.
It's a non-problem.
No, I think it is. I think it is a problem, but we won't rehash our 2-hour thank God for Nostr conversation.
This is not an implementation podcast. I mean, although like it is on our other version of this podcast. I mean, like, you know, things get a little out of control. But guys, like, okay, listen, we're coming on the top of the hour.
Can I give you two more kinds of groups?
Sure, go ahead.
I'll go fast. So what I'm exploring right now is relay-based groups, which is like really the simplest thing you can think of. It's like it's a relay, and you connect only to that relay and read the stuff that's on it. Kind of like Ditto, kind of like NIP29, but really, really, really dumb. So I'm exploring that right now. And then the other thing that deserves an honorable mention is Jeff G's NIP104, which is probably going to change because Jeff doesn't like 3-letter NIP names, but he is applying MLS to Nostr. And I don't really see this as a new type of group. Like, we're talking about groups in terms of use cases and applications, but I think it's probably a new substrate for like direct messages, group chats, and any kind of like privacy-oriented group solution.
It's going to be very segregated. Like, I mean, like by definition, it will be very segregated.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to play as we understand Nostr. It's going to be a very sort of, by definition, I mean, that you're trying to have private things.
It's a different thing. It's for a different thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can have Nostr inside a private group at least.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rabble.
You can do this MLS group, which is you create the MLS group of everybody who you follow and who follows you, or even one level out, you make it really broad. And then it's not accessible to Google and the broader internet, any random person, but all of your posts and groups and everything end up inside there.
You know, the way I like to think about it is like the social graph going forward should be thought into like a Nostr language, right? Like it's like Nostr is how we define the kinds of interactions you have and the kinds of events you have, right? In a social graph. You know, you may take this into tangents that are fully private. But the cool thing is, you know, like an article that is long form is going to show up right. The client's going to know what to do with it. And you can interact with this public-private sort of sphere like in a much better, healthier way.
Yeah, I think what Rabble's mentioning is actually another super interesting, completely different type of group, which is content visibility, right? So I think it's Google Plus, right? It had the circles. So
Google Circles.
Google Circles, whatever. I can't remember it. All those dead products.
Right after Google Wave.
But you could say, like, only share this content with these circles. And that's like a different kind of subjective group. It's kind of switched inside out. If we could actually build that on Nostr with the MLS stuff, that would be fantastic.
It's interesting.
Can't see why not.
We have one other group, which we haven't mentioned, but does work and people are using, which are the hashtags. Like, you can hashtag your content. You can, in a bunch of the clients, you can request for all the posts that have that hashtag to relays, and then you can subscribe to those hashtags. And then you're seeing content grouped by whoever's using that hashtag, not based on who you're following. And that is a kind of group.
Early days of Twitter, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also want to say, like, for the people listening, it sounds like there's complete chaos and no one can make up their minds about groups. But, you know, this is Nostr. There's a lot of subjectivity. A lot of different approaches can succeed. And this is a result of the complexity of groups applied to Nostr. So, like, don't come away from this thinking Nostr devs can't cooperate on a single solution. It's that there are many different solutions for many different problems in this space.
You know, we are discovering the right solution for the right problems.
It's no different than TCP/IP, right? Like, I mean, you know, people are going to build shit on top of it. And it's, you know, hopefully most things intersect and you have a standard and some things won't. And that's okay, right? Like, we don't have hard consensus on Nostr, which is a lot of fun, right? Like, people build things and hopefully we find ways of speccing out things that like interact, and then, you know, we have a bigger network. And if you don't play nice with the network, you don't have a network. Mm-hmm. Everything is good for Nostr. Listen, guys, what an awesome conversation. I think there's a lot here that people can unpack, and you know, with the other episodes, they're going to go through it. And, you know, sure, some of you guys, all of you guys are going to come on other episodes as well. And we're going to try to release a binge watch Netflix level, no video version of all this. So you can listen at 2x for 12 hours or whatever. Guys, any final thoughts, Mr. Hodlbod?
Well, one other aspect of communities we didn't get to talk about is the difference between, like I say, there's a lot. I've been thinking about this. There's a difference between digital communities and in-person communities, right? Like, I've been focused on the in-person communities that I already have, that I want to support, that I want to see flourish, and take advantage of digital tools without having the digital world sort of like eat the community. Digital communities are like a whole different thing, and that's a totally valid use case. But I think there's a tendency to focus on that because we're technologists and we're working in the digital realm. But I think it's equally interesting to see what we can do to help in-person communities operate in person better. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on. I think is interesting.
I'm just happy to see the ham community, the ham radio community come to Nostr. I was not expecting that.
The analog on digital in-person community. Yeah.
That's, I mean, the ultimate nerd sport. Can you send it over radio? Mr. Pablo, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the community stuff is what I'm the most interested at the moment. I see a lot of growth on Nostr because I think Nostr is really good at the long tail of everything because you can experiment with like really weird shit while remaining in a big network. And I think that's super cool. And I think communities is another approach to experimenting with the long tail, but at a social level. So yeah, I'm super excited about what's to come with communities.
I think communities are the path by which we bring Nostr to a much larger world. Like, we have this super app platform that is an open protocol version of basically what Facebook in 2008 was, where you have all these different apps and the social graph and the communication, except it's not controlled by some company that's going to do shit with it. Mm-hmm. And communities and all these different groups are how we get there, because that's how you get people finding their people. And humanity is tribal. But as we're building these things, we need to make these communities easy to discover, easy to find, easy to get into, and easy to invite people into and draw them in. And right now, a lot of our community stuff is like off on these edges, and there's like not ways in which a normal Nostr user gets pulled in and starts participating more in these different groups and communities. And so we have a big user experience problem to work on beyond just all of these different implementations.
Yeah, but we can fix that in 2 weeks. Alex, final thoughts.
I couldn't have said it better than Rabble. I just want Nostr to win. And I think that fostering communities is a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it feels like Nostr is winning. Like, I'm generally spending more time there than I am in other places.
Me too.
Just naturally, without trying to force it, which is, to me, the heuristic that I like. And, I mean, it's just so much fucking shit getting built. And you don't need permission. And it's fun. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun for a change. You know? It's awesome, guys. Listen, thank you so much for giving an hour of your time for this episode. I think we covered a lot. I'm sure Hodlbod could talk another 50 types of communities. And we appreciate him for that. Anyways, thank you so much. There's more coming, and Nostr is happening.
Yeah, thanks for having us, MBK.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more resources, check the show notes. We put a lot of effort into them. And remember, we don't have a crystal ball, so let us know about your project. Visit bitcoin.review to find out how to get in touch.